And I wanted to, yesterday, it was great to be in the room and to hear and to see part of the story. But I wanted Anne-Marie to share, Anne-Marie, if you don't mind, about how this all started. And that's be the first part, right? Okay. So if you could share, give us details, tell us the story of how God moved and put this on your heart and those early years and all the wrestles and stuff. How this started to where it's come today. And I'm not asking for like 30 years of history, but just the main points of how God burdened your heart to start this. Can we stand and honour as Anne-Marie comes to the platform right now? Would you like a stool? No. She's Scottish, she's hard.
I am.
You need a pulpit?
Not really. It's only me. It's such a pleasure for me to be here.
Does anybody need an interpreter?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Does everyone understand me? Yeah. So I'm actually, the secret is that actually I was born here in Australia. I was born in Adelaide. My parents were 10-pound Poms. But they left Australia after 10 years and went back home to Glasgow. And I was nearly 6 when I left, and I then grew up in Glasgow. My parents never could return because they always planned to return, but my mother was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and she was never allowed to come back because the disease was so bad, and it just went on and on and on. And so they ended up settling in Glasgow. And my father particularly lived with that regret all his life. He loved Australia, absolutely loved it. And so it's actually really, really special for me to be here in Australia. I haven't been ever back since I was 5. Isn't that amazing? I'm now 67, so 62 years. And it's an incredible pleasure. And it's so wonderful that I can be here with you this morning. It's a beautiful area, so enjoyed the drive. What a privilege to be here. So how did Arise start? Well, have you ever heard the story of people who keep on saying, we can't do it, we can't do anything for God because we don't have this and we don't have that. We don't have the gifts. And that was kind of my story. I am a missionary, and my husband and I joined an organisation called WEC International. And we've been part of them for about 35 years now. I still am, called Active Retired. But I'm still doing and still serving the Lord. When we joined the organisation, we joined already with a vision to work in the area of Central Asia, which is all the countries with Stan at the end of their name. And they were former Soviet Union republics, and they became free in the 1989 and early 1990s, which is when we joined WEC. I remember we were on the candidates course when the Berlin Wall fell, and we were watching that on telly. Amazing experience to see that. And that then opened the doors. And that was a significant event which then opened the doors for Christians to be able to go into Central Asia. My husband, Danny, was like a pioneer. He went in with other brothers and he went into Central Asia and began to train the very few Christians that existed how to use radio as a means to reach their people. That because that's what we did, we were radio people. In 1986, I think, or 1987, no, I was at Bible college then. 1998, I was invited to go on a prayer trip to Turkmenistan. And Turkmenistan was one of the closed countries, most closed countries in the world. But we managed to get visas to get in and to just walk around the country and pray. And that was the most amazing experience I have ever had. And there, God began to speak to me about women in Islam, because I began to see and hear stories of how difficult it was for women to come to God in the world of Islam. They have to do a lot more to come close to God. As soon as they have their periods or a baby spews on them, they become dirty and they have to go and wash themselves and then come to God. And then they pick babies up and the baby dribbles on them and they still can't come to God because of that, because they're dirty, unclean. And this is the life of Muslim ladies. They have to work really, really hard to come anywhere close to God. And that made me furious. Like I saw this most beautiful mosque in Turkmenistan, one of the poorest areas in the world, honestly. And there in the middle of this city was this huge mosque built by French money and with a golden dome, beautiful chandeliers, marble floors, so rich, so much money in it, and it broke my heart. Women had to go up 3 flights of stairs and to pray to God, looking down on the men who were closer to God than they were. And I thought, that's not what you meant to happen, Jesus. And when I came home from that trip, I began to explore more and more the world of Islam, what it was like for women. And I heard things like, listen to this one. So I saw a vision of the hellfire, and the majority of its dwellers were women. Written and said and written in the book of teachings of Muhammad. Or out of every 1,000 women, one will go to heaven. Out of every 1,000 men, only one will go to hell. This is the world of Islam. It's not what Jesus meant. This is not what God, our Father, wanted to happen. It made me furious. And then I continued to visit Central Asia. I was invited to talk to women's groups. I heard stories. I went to a women's group in Azerbaijan. There was 10 women there, and they all had like 10 children. And in that group, I met one woman who only had one child. So I asked them, why do they have so many children? They trusted me by that point, and I could ask questions like that to them. And they told me, so this was actually a Christian group. It was the first time as a group of women that they were ever allowed to meet together, because women in the church weren't allowed to meet at the beginning. And this was maybe actually only 5 or 6 years ago, pre-COVID. They still weren't allowed to meet together. Pentecostal church. So these women are being taught by their pastor husbands, and the Bible says in Timothy, it's gone. It says that women are saved by childbirth. I'll look the verse up. But it says it in Timothy, women are saved by childbirth. So Paul is talking about the role of women in church, and then he has this little hyphen in the middle of it. Women are saved by childbirth. These women are being taught the more children that they have, the more saved that they will be. This is a Christian group who are, they're supposed to be saved. They're supposed to know that they don't have to do any work to come to Jesus because he's done it all for them. But yet, they're being taught things like that. And then you meet this young woman who could only have one child. What does that mean, and what does that say to her? And she came up and told me her story, that when she had given birth to her first child, she nearly died. And the doctors told her, don't have any more children or you will die. And the pressure in her church is for her to continue to have children because she will be saved by childbirth. And she's heartbroken and she's having to deal with that. And then I go in and I say, that's not true. And I had an opportunity to pray with every single one of those women. And I pray that they will be free to be the women that God has meant them to be. So I heard stories and stories and stories of women who are being told that they're second-class citizens. They're hearing it from the book of teachings of Muhammad. They are being told by their husbands and their fathers that they're not worth anything. Boys will get fed when girls don't. If there's poverty in the house, the boys will get the food, the girls won't. The boys will get educated and the girls won't. The boys can go to university, the girls can't. This is the world of Islam in Central Asia. And then you hear the stories of abuse and domestic violence, and it's huge. Every woman has a story of domestic violence. Every single woman. I don't think I've met one woman yet who has not been a victim of that. Awful sexual abuse and rape, just so prevalent in these countries. And so my story is, I began to say to God, what can I do? Jesus, what do you want to do for the lives of these women? And one day, this idea clicked into my head. Well, I could do and maybe a conference and just gather women from around the nations that I've already met and invite them to be together and to hear their stories. And this idea just never went away from my mind. But the thing was, I kept on saying to God, God, can you send somebody who can do this? Because I think this should happen. Send somebody and I will help them. I kept on telling God, I can't do this. Like, I'm I don't even have a university degree. Um, I'm not a social worker or a counsellor. I've never run a conference in my life. I can't do any of those things. And then the breakthrough came one morning. When I was having my quiet time, I read the story of the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. Such a common story. We all know it, don't we? And that day, I was reading it, and it was like a voice from heaven. It really was. It's the first time that I've ever experienced that. And God said to me, Anne Marie, will you please stop telling me about the things that you cannot do, but give me the things that you can do and allow me to do the rest. That little boy gave 5 loaves and 2 fishes. The disciples brought that to me, and I multiplied all of that so I could feed thousands and thousands of people. And we had leftovers. Just give me your 5 loaves and your 2 fishes and allow me to do the rest. And that was it. That was it for me. I knew that I had to do something myself. And so I went to somebody and asked them if I could hang on at the end of this international conference and gather a group of women together. And that was how Arise started. 19 women came from all over Central Asia. And for 2 days, I remember I was on the plane coming to Turkey, and I thought, hang on, I don't actually know what I'm going to do when I get there. It was literally like that. I had done all the organisation. I had brought women. I had organised, raised the money, everything that I needed. But I had never been able to work out in my head what was I supposed to do with 19 women. And God told me, don't do anything. Just listen to their stories. And that's what we did. And that was 2 days of listening to the stories of these 19 women. And those stories absolutely broke our hearts. I had a prayer team with me. Then 5 women came to pray. And we listened to these women's stories. And we cried. And we cried. And we cried with these ladies. Their stories were so horrific. They really were. And I believe those stories and those tears that we shed were the foundation stone to be laid for future Arise. That's what Arise is all about, is giving women their voice and allow them to tell their stories and to be believed, to be understood, and to know the love of God being poured out upon them. And that's what we've been doing ever since. We started with 19 women. The following year, I continued. And this time, I had a program, I had a speaker, I had someone coming to talk about domestic violence, which was absolutely huge. Had 34 women. The next year, similar thing, 3 days, 43 women. The next year, 4 days, 58 women. And so it went on, 63, 68, 74. I remember the number, 74, 86, 99. When we reached 100. Wow, what are you doing, Lord? And every year, the Lord just appears. It's the most amazing thing that happens. And every year before I go, I'm saying, Lord, are you still going to do this? Are you still going to be there? Are you still going to work? And he does. And I just stand in awe of it. I watch and I see the Lord at work. Presence is tangible in the place, the presence of the Lord, and he just comes and touches the women, and he looks in their eyes and just says, I love you. That breaks down all the barriers and the boundaries. That's what they need to hear, that God loves them. The simple message of that. We give them hugs and we give them cuddles. We listen to their stories, and we're still doing that. But we bring in Joy, who's the most amazing speaker that I've ever met in my whole life. And she reaches their hearts through the Bible teaching. And God gives that verse to me every year. Without fail, he speaks to me and shows me what we have to do for the following year. And that in itself is such a miracle for me, that he still does that. And he still speaks. And he still leads us. And he still guides us. And the changes that are happening, he's part of it all. Step by step, as we grow, we have to change to enable us to grow even stronger. All the countries, Central Asia, we had 5 nations at the beginning, and at the last count we had 18. Is that right? 18 nations. And my heart is for Muslim countries. That's the thing for me, is definitely Muslim countries. So now we have Iranian women. We've had women from Iraq. We have some women from Turkey. We have women from India. We have women from, help me, Fiona, I'm losing the count now. Oh, North Africa. That's a miracle. Tunisia, Egypt. What a miracle. And now next year, Afghan women we're hoping for. I'm hoping for Pakistani women. Hoping and dreaming for women from all around that region to be able to come and meet with Jesus. Meet with Jesus. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful to see women coming to the conference and having that encounter with Jesus. It's so real. It's so tangible. He touches them. He heals them. He lifts them up. And they're sent back home bold, strong, confident. And we hear stories when they go back to their countries, they go to their neighbours, they go to their communities, they go to their churches, and their communities are changed because they're bringing something amazing back with them. And I hear stories where women from Arise have become women of influence in their countries. So they're being involved, they're setting up projects to help women in domestic violence situations. They're setting up projects to rescue women out of prostitution, which is a huge issue in our countries. Human trafficking, huge, absolutely huge. Women are being trafficked every day. Women and children disappear. They just disappear, taken off the streets and trafficked, taken away, and nobody knows where they go to. It's a big, big problem in our countries. But these women are now being involved in projects, setting up projects, changing laws. Amazing what God is doing. Have I said enough?
Tell us about the dream then.
The dream, we're allowed to dream big.
Yes.
That's our Jesus, right? And I love watching what Jesus is doing, and I know that there is so much more. And I dream big. That's why I want the women from Afghanistan. They've been on my heart. Their sorrows and their troubles, they just break my heart. I've been trying to get women from Afghanistan for years, years and years and years, and every year the door closes on their face. They can't get out of their countries. But this year we have a plan, because we have met two Tajik ladies who have gone to Turkey to work with Afghan refugees, and they have doing with their husbands. They're doing church planting among the refugees, Afghan refugees. And there is a group of Tajik people in Tajikistan who are also working with Afghan refugees within Tajikistan. And they have already come to me and said, can we bring women from these refugee camps? So next year we might see a fulfillment of that dream finally. That's my prayer. Wow. Yeah. But you know what excites me about that as well? It's not expat women who are reaching out to the Afghan refugees. It's Tajik women. Do you realise the significance of that? That these churches who have only existed for something like 10 to 15 years, like they're not Christian nations, they're Islamic nations. The Christian church is still so small, and yet they're already sending out missionaries. They're sending missionaries to China, to the Uyghurs, to places where expats can't go to. They've sent missionaries into Afghanistan, and they have seen martyrs already. We had one woman come to Arise about 5 years ago, and when she came, honestly, I have never seen a woman so broken as her. And she sat in a corner, wouldn't partake of the conference. But then slowly but slowly, we could see God working in her heart. And then after the conference finished, she came and I invited her to sit with me. And I finally heard her story. She and her husband had gone with another Tajik couple, and they had gone to Afghanistan as missionaries. And they were serving there in an Afghan neighborhood, and they were doing Bible studies with Afghan Christians. And one day, this one family were doing a Bible study, and the neighbor told on them, and the Taliban broke in, found their Bibles, and this is awful. So apparently, when they go to Afghanistan, they train themselves what to do if the Taliban should break in, and they train their children what they should do if that should ever happen. And so the children are trained. Taliban breaks through the door, you run, and you run as fast as you can, and you hide as if you can. And the mother shouted to the children, run, 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 run. But the children got caught, and the whole family were murdered, absolutely shot. And my lovely young woman was a close friend of this family, and it totally broke her heart. And they had to come home after that, obviously. It wasn't safe anymore, and they had to come home. And this was 1 year later after this event, and the pastor in her church was telling her, it's time to pull yourself together, get back into ministry. You know, they couldn't understand the terrible trauma and grief process that that woman was going through. But at Arise, she was finally able to tell her story and to receive prayer, prayer, and more prayer, so that she got healed. Absolutely got healed. And this woman that was so downcast and so broken, she was absolutely shining. Shining. That's all I could say. And that woman went back, and she is going everywhere sharing about Jesus. She's the most amazing woman, going into so many different countries using the materials that we have given to her, running Flourish courses and and running women's conferences, broken but healed. And now we want to see that. That's my dream. There are so many other women in so many other different countries. North Africa, that is absolutely huge. The church is growing. Amazing, miraculous growth of the church in North Africa. But their women are exactly the same as the Central Asian women. And now we want to bring them, and now we want to go there, actually, and start what we would call a Middle East, Northern Africa conference, and do a Rise for them. And then we would love to go to some other countries and start a Rise for them. Some of our team have got a passion for Malaysia, Vietnam, that region. So in the future, we could see ourselves sending a team there and connecting with people and doing a Rise there. Dream big. The world is a big place. 50% of the population of the world are women, right? And I so desire to have them know how much Jesus loves them. Simple message. Those songs that we sang, never heard them, never heard those songs in my life before. Amazing, amazing worship songs. And when you see women from so many different countries worshipping together, it's absolutely amazing. And they can't worship freely. Like they can't meet together. So many of them can't even meet together as church because they live in some of the most persecuted lands in the world. And they come to Arise, which is a safe place, and they can worship freely. Can you imagine the joy of that? How wonderful that is, just even to be able to put their hands up and worship the Lord without anyone knocking on their door. We have women whose husbands have been in prison for their faith. Many women from Uzbekistan, their husbands have been in prison for their faith. This is their world. And we can take them out of that just for 4 days and give them a place of peace and security and love. That's what Arise does best. And we know we have so much more to do. And I have the most amazing team who will enable us to do that. So grateful. And all the women who come from Australia, how exciting that is. I love it. What amazing. You know, we had 100 women on the ministry team. Have to count how many Australians we had, but there was quite a significant amount of Australians serving on those ministry teams. How marvellous is that? We had women from all over the expat world who have come to serve these women And that is so special. Jane has an amazing testimony, really. Isaiah 61 you shared yesterday, that's my verse. That's my calling, Isaiah 61. To come. That's our mission, to come and heal the brokenhearted, bind up the brokenhearted, bring the women out of their captivity, break the chains off. That's the calling. That's my calling. There's nothing I love better than sitting with women and praying for them and seeing that miracle happen. I love my visits to these countries. That's where my heart is, visiting the women where they are even. And I hope now, as we get Arise going again, that we'll be able to do more trips like that into these countries and meet with them where they are. Wonderful.
We signed a memorandum of understanding to satisfy Joy yesterday, but I want you to know that we as a church will continue to pray. We have been praying and will continue to pray. I want you to know also that we will give our loaves and fishes also, because we believe in you and the dream that you have. And so we're going to pray in a moment. But Jane, would you like to?
So, for the new people who are in the room, last year, wasn't it? Was invited to go to Arise Ministries. And so I took up the invitation, and the Lord did something there as a going forward in our mission, our lives. And when I came home, shared with our ladies in this church got a hold of it and a vision for it. And then we had a ladies' dinner to raise monies for Arise. And a lot of the women, some are in the room today, from the community got the vision also. That's how, out of that became us asking, how do we become a hub to joy? And so there's 3 hubs in Brisbane. And you know, they've taken a chance on us because Anne-Marie doesn't really know us. Joy does. We've journeyed with Joy a long time. But the executive team didn't really know us. But we felt compelled to be a part of this and what God's doing I get emotion. And what God's doing in Arise Ministries, because we have a passion for the widow and the orphan. We carry that strongly. And over the years, we've done incredible things where God has positioned us to look after the widows and the orphans. And so this now is another part of that, the and some. You know, what can we do? We do this in Indonesia, India, and now this is the and some. And, we believe that it's got, our board was, when we came back, they knew that it wasn't the end of Arise. We were going to continue with Arise. And you as women, you all, I love that ministry you were saying. And so this is now our continuation with Arise. An incredible ministry that I just, in those rooms that you created for these women, to just step aside and be loved on and cared for. Just amazing. An amazing executive team. And that we heard the executive, some of them, their hearts yesterday. And again, it stirred up something within. What that looks like to the fullness, we don't know. But we should pray.
I want to do something really symbolic. If I could get Emery, would you step down here just a moment, please? Fiona, could you come and stand with her? And Jane too. And then I'm going to ask the men to stand up and come and pray for these women. I want everybody in the room praying. Of course, I want the women praying. But symbolically, I want these women to know that the men believe and support them. So can my brothers please come and stand around and pray with us right now? I was talking to a man, I don't know if I shared this, but I was talking to a man who travels a lot, and he was talking that God's Spirit is moving around the place. And I said to him, I asked him a question, I said, you know, a few decades ago, we was enjoying a massive move of God's Spirit, but the thing was, it looked the same everywhere. You could sort of tell because it looked the same. I said, but now, in my limited travel, I'm seeing stuff, and it's definitely a move of God, but it doesn't look the same. It's different everywhere. And he told me that's what he's seeing, and he believes the Holy Spirit now is breathing on places. He's breathing on what that local church is doing kingdom-wise. God's breathing on that. That's why it looks different everywhere else. But it's definitely a move of God's Spirit all around the world. And so God's breathing, and obviously God's breathed on Arise, and the cliche rings so true that the best is yet to come. I love the fact that when they touch a woman, she goes back and touches a family, touches a church, touches a community. And the story that we just heard about that woman in Afghanistan, how she's going around, that's awesome. But that's repeated all over the place. I was worried about, the end and when Jesus might eventually come back. Because when I got saved, I thought he was coming back any day. Then I had got a heart for missions, and I realized every people got to hear, and so that would be like, I'll be well gone before that. But now the way the Spirit of God is moving, who knows what's going to happen in the near future? All I know is that we've got to be faithful, and we've got to be prepared to give our loaves and fishes, and we've got to be prepared to stand behind and pray, but we've also got to be prepared to stand up and get involved. So I want all our men to pray for these women right now. Can we all just join?